Hi everyone, this is my response to the critical thinking readings we had to do this week and the videos. Dr. Elder is a little less off-putting a personality than Dr. Paul. And the egocentric thinking was kind of interesting. And you can certainly see examples of it anytime you look at social media. Twitter is full of this, Facebook as well. And we can look around and we can actually see, or at least when I look around, I can see many of the consequences they're talking about for egocentric thinking, just in the actions, in the ages, and everything. That part of it interested me less than the chapter on decision. Excuse me. Starting to catch a cold. Decision making. Chapter 9 was kind of fascinating and interesting to read, and I tended to agree with a lot of it. There were parts of it where, when it was talking about the fact that young adults in the age group I teach don't have quite the awareness of consequences and long-term planning and everything. And as I was reading it, I broke out laughing because we've had that conversation around here so many times. It's just, like I've lost count. Teachers and staff who deal with students pretty much always, they gotta learn the consequences. And of course we're saying this, and it's part of the age group. And since we deal with 17, 18-year-olds a lot, and that part of their brain is not where they are, it makes sense. So a lot of that made a lot of sense to me, and I was not happy, though, with a few things that popped up in the decision-making section. There are some examples of bad decision-making, and some of the exercises about bad decisions, which are really problematic. Let me get my book. I should have marked these. For instance, I have all kind of notes. 2 for that. For instance, when it's talking about accurately recognizing the alternatives, and it gives, I know he's got faults, but he loves me, I can help him. I know there are lots of problems in our relationship, but we love each other. I know I'm not doing well at my job, but I'll be recognized. And there's a whole element of sexism that seems to throw into that. B, there are some cultural conditions, and I'm sure that's covered in Chapter 11 about sociocentric tendencies, but it seems they're showing up here. There was when they have testing the idea to see if it's making problems with poor decision making, and the first one is about staying in an abusive relationship, then it's taking drugs, and then it's overeating to deal with depression, and yada yada yada. And it was the depression one that got me, because mental illness is not something critical thinking is going to deal with. And there's an issue with that attitude that I found offensive, frankly. I deal with too many students and too many people in my own family who have depression of some sort or another, so that those kind of offhand things, they seem flippant and diminish a problem. You cannot solve depression by critically examining what's making you depressed when you don't know. So it's, there were some things in there I found really problematic on that sort of thing. The abusive situations, staying in an abusive relationship for the children. And there was another example that I cannot find at the moment. I just found those kind of, you can critically think all you want on some of those things, and you can certainly know you're making a bad decision or recognize you've made a bad decision. Critical thinking is not necessarily going to help you out when somebody's running around trying to punch you in the nose. Um, Critical thinking is not always going to be that solution, and I think that's one of the things I'm finding with this book is I mean I certainly agree with critical thinking. It's part of what I do is in my profession. I'm involved in the two fields that use it a great deal, English and philosophy. Um, but when I'm looking at this book and I'm reading this book, I'm finding, some of their own problems are in there, and that there's just some casual stuff that's just kind of, appalling the way they throw it out. And I don't know, I mean, the other thing I started as I was reading this, especially stuff about egocentrism, and I could see a lot of how that plays out, and it was a question one of the guys asked in the video that made me start thinking about this, which was when Dr. Elder describes the two children who took the third out to torture, and, she's using it as an example of bad decision making. Guys going, this is pathological. This is I can't say the word. Sociopathy, and I'm that made me start thinking, and it goes back to something Sandra has said for a long time. There seems to be, and I don't know that there isn't, but there seems to be a lack of awareness of brain studies and studies about how the mind works, and how things work physically that sort of get skimmed over. There are reasons we think egocentrically, after all. They are key to survival to think egocentrically, so that, I don't know, there's some stuff going on in the book that comes out of really thoughtless, and that's ironic as all heck to be saying, but thoughtlessness in here. The example of Max and Maxine going to the video store. One of the big things I wrote all over it was how stereotypical it was. I mean, even to the point where Max wants action movies and Maxine wants love stories. If you're going to talk about critical thinking, use it on yourself, I guess is where I'm getting, because a lot of examples like that just seem frustrating to me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But I find them problematic. And there's a huge sense of irony to the fact that here's this book, critical thinking, it's the way to go, it will give you control, and yet it's got places where obviously they didn't apply critical thinking to their own work. So, I don't know. Again, I really like the pattern, I like the premise, and I feel like I'm grading a student paper where I go, I really like your premise, your thesis is pretty solid, but your evidence sucks. I would say it more nicely than that, but still, this makes me want to go back and look at, and I've said it before, other ways and the way other approaches to critical thinking and the links between critical thinking and cognitive science and actual brain science. Because what I get a sense of here, and I'm sure it underlies it, but it seems missing. And that makes this problematic. I've taken forever just to say it's a problem, which I keep saying every week almost. So, sorry about taking so long. Have a good week and revising papers. Bye-bye.